Blood has a memory. It remembers every sin, every sacrifice, every promise, broken in the name of survival. The lone rider crests the ridge as dawn breaks over the Wyoming wilderness. 20 years of peace stripped away in a single night. 20 years of pretending that vengeance and mercy could occupy the same heart. They shouldn't have taken her daughter. Beneath weathered hands, silver-plated revolvers gleam in the morning light, rose engravings catching the sun. Instruments of death that have lain dormant waiting. Like the rage, like the skill. The red bandana flutters in the wind, a battle flag reclaimed. The ghost town below holds secrets. It holds captives. It holds the past that never truly died. Some say justice is blind, but vengeance sees everything, every slight, every debt, every opportunity. And vengeance remembers. The West has forgotten the legend they once called Red Rose. By sundown, they'll remember why they feared her name. Pine Ridge, Wyoming Territory, 1888. Dust kicked up in swirls as the stagecoach rolled into town. The wooden sign swayed in the autumn breeze. Pine Ridge, founded 1871. A place where most folks came to leave their past behind. Sarah Blackwood lifted the heavy crate of canned goods with practiced ease. 45 years had weathered her skin, but hadn't diminished her strength. Her sleeves were rolled up, revealing forearms corded with lean muscle that most of the town's men would envy. She stacked the provisions with methodical precision. "Mrs. Blackwood, you shouldn't be lifting those yourself," Sheriff Daniels called from across the street. "Let young Thomas help you with that." Sarah smiled politely, her auburn hair now streaked with silver, catching the late afternoon sun. "I've been managing this store for 15 years, Sheriff. These arms haven't failed me yet." The bell above the door jingled and Emily Blackwood stepped into the general store. 16 years old, with her mother's fiery hair and her father's soft hazel eyes. She carried a basket of fresh bread from the bakery. "Mama, Mrs. Peterson says that thunderstorm's still coming tonight. You think we should bring in the flower boxes from the porch?" Sarah's gaze softened at the sight of her daughter. "Best to be safe. Last storm nearly drowned my marigolds." Emily set the bread on the counter and wiped flour from her apron. Her innocence was a balm to Sarah's soul, a reminder of all the good that had somehow come from a life stained with blood. The general store was modest but well kept. Shelves stocked with everything a frontier family might need: tools, fabric, ammunition, preserved food. A life built on reliability and service rather than violence and revenge. Sheriff Daniels tipped his hat and continued his patrol. Through the window, Sarah watched him go, thankful that in Pine Ridge the law walked openly in the daylight. Not all places she'd known were so fortunate. "I'll finish up here," Sarah told Emily. "Go on home and start supper. I'll bring those ledgers to balance after closing time." The girl nodded and kissed her mother's weathered cheek. "Don't be late. I'm making Pa's stew recipe." Sarah's heart tightened. Matthew had been gone nearly 20 years, but his memory lived on in their daughter. In the curve of her smile, in her stubborn nature, in the way she could charm nearly anyone into giving her what she wanted. As Emily left, Sarah turned to a customer who needed flour and sugar. The mundane rhythm of commerce washed over her like a cleansing rain. None of these good people knew the truth. None of them knew who Sarah Blackwood had once been. None of them had ever heard of Red Rose. Night fell over Pine Ridge, bringing with it the promised storm. Thunder cracked like gunshots in the distance. Sarah sat at the kitchen table, her reading glasses perched on her nose as she reviewed the day's receipts. Emily stirred the hearty stew that filled the room with the aroma of home. Peace. Safety. Lightning flashed, illuminating the cabin. For just a second, Sarah glimpsed herself in the window's reflection, not as she was now, but as she had been. Young. Merciless. A red bandana across her face. A Colt Navy revolver in each hand. She blinked and the vision vanished. "You're quiet tonight, Mama," Emily said, ladling the stew into bowls. Sarah removed her glasses. "Just tired, darling. You work too hard," says the girl who bakes for half the town before dawn. They shared a smile, this bond forged in the absence of the man who should have been there to complete their family. After supper, with rain lashing against the windows, Sarah opened the bottom drawer of her bureau. Beneath neatly folded linens lay a small brass key. She palmed it while Emily washed the dishes, slipping outside to the shed despite the downpour. Water dripped from her hair as she struck a match and lit the lantern. In the corner beneath stacked firewood and old horse blankets was a trunk. The key slid into the lock with a reluctant creak. Inside a past she had tried to bury. Two custom Remington revolvers, silver-plated with rose engravings on the handles. A red bandana, faded but still vibrant. A bounty hunter's badge. Wanted posters, yellowed with age. A leather-bound journal filled with names, some crossed out. And a newspaper clipping massacre at Eagles Canyon. 12 dead bounty hunters led by notorious Red Rose. Responsible for tribal bloodbath, Sarah traced her fingers over the headline. Her breath caught in her throat as the memories flooded back. 20 years ago, she had been different then. Ruthless, feared, the leader of the most effective and most brutal bounty hunting posse west of the Mississippi. The Red Rose Gang. She had created the legend herself. A woman in a man's world she had needed to be twice as deadly, thrice as cold. She'd worn that red bandana and left a single rose on the bodies of those she hunted down. The West had whispered her name in fear, until Eagles Canyon. The posse had tracked a murderer named William Rattlesnake Foster to a Shoshone settlement. Tensions had been high. The tribe was protecting Foster, or so they claimed. What happened next had been chaos, gunfire, screams. When it was over, 12 people lay dead, women, children, and Matthew, her beloved Matthew, shot through the heart. Some said it was a tribal warrior who killed him. Others whispered it was a stray bullet from one of their own posse. All Sarah knew was that she walked away from that canyon a widow carrying their infant daughter, and a guilt that would never wash clean. She'd buried Red Rose that day, vanished into the frontier, changed her name, built a new life centered around the promise she'd made to Matthew's cooling body that their daughter would never know the taste of violence. Thunder crashed overhead, jolting Sarah back to the present. She quickly closed the trunk, locked it, and returned to the house soaked to the bone. Emily looked up from her book. "Mama, you're drenched. What were you doing out there?" "Just securing the shed door." Sarah lied, the habit of deception, still so easy after all these years. This wind would tear it right off the hinges. Later, as Emily slept, Sarah sat by the window watching lightning split the sky. Her hand unconsciously moved to the silver chain around her neck, the one thing from her past she wore openly. Hanging from it was her wedding ring and a small silver rose pendant, Matthew's last gift to her. 20 years, she whispered to the storm. 20 years of peace. She didn't know it then, but peace was about to end. 3 days later, Sarah stood behind the counter, measuring coffee beans for Mrs. Abernathy, when the door burst open. Sheriff Daniels entered, his usual easygoing demeanor, replaced with rigid professionalism. "Sarah," he said, using her first name, a rarity for him. "May I have a word?" She nodded to her assistant, young Thomas, to take over with Mrs. Abernathy. Something in the sheriff's eyes sent a cold dart of dread through her heart. They stepped outside onto the porch. "Emily didn't come in to drop off bread at the jail this morning," he said without preamble. "Mrs. Peterson said she never showed up for work." "Is she sick?" Sarah's blood turned to ice. "She left before dawn, same as always." "I haven't seen her since." The sheriff's face darkened. "When was the last time she missed work?" "Never." The word fell from Sarah's lips like a stone. They moved with urgency. Sarah closed the store, ignoring the confused looks from customers. The sheriff gathered 3 deputies. They retraced Emily's usual morning route from the Blackwood home to the bakery. Nothing. Then one of the deputies called out from an alley between the livery stable and the blacksmith shop. "Sheriff, over here." Sarah reached the scene first, maternal instinct driving her forward like a locomotive. The alley held signs of a struggle. A basket overturned, fresh bread trampled in the dirt, and blood. Not much, but enough to recognize the rust-colored stain on the hard-packed earth. "Emily," Sarah's voice cracked as she called her daughter's name. The sheriff placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "We'll find her, Sarah." But Sarah wasn't listening. Her eyes had locked onto something caught in the splintered wood of a crate, a scrap of fabric, black cloth with a red R embroidered in the corner. She recognized it instantly. The Reeves gang, outlaws who operated in the territories north of here, cattle rustlers and stagecoach robbers who had recently graduated to kidnapping for ransom. "What is it?" Sheriff Daniels asked, noting her fixation on the fabric. Sarah's mind raced. If she told him what she knew, questions would follow. Questions about how a simple shopkeeper could identify an outlaw gang's marker. Questions that might lead to the truth about Red Rose. "I don't know," she lied, "but I've seen Emily's shawl. It's torn." The sheriff nodded, accepting her explanation. "We'll organize a search party. Check every building in town first, then fan out. If someone's taken her, they can't have gotten far in daylight." But Sarah knew better. The Reeves gang had a reputation for moving fast and hiding deep in the mountains. By the time the sheriff's men were mounted and ready, Emily would be miles away. "Sarah, go home," Sheriff Daniels urged, "in case she returns or if someone brings a ransom note." She nodded mechanically, but her mind was already racing down a different track, a track she had abandoned 2 decades ago. Night fell. No word came. The search parties returned empty-handed. Sheriff Daniels knocked on Sarah's door with nothing but hollow reassurances. "We've telegraphed the surrounding towns. Every lawman for 100 miles will be looking for her." Sarah thanked him with as much gratitude as she could muster, but after he left, she moved with cold determination. She dragged the trunk from the shed into her bedroom. The lid creaked open, revealing her past. The guns, the bandana, the badge, all preserved as if waiting for this very moment. From a hidden compartment in the trunk's lid, she extracted a folded map marked with hideouts, trails and secret passes, knowledge that had once made Red Rose so effective at finding those who didn't want to be found. One location was circled in faded ink: the Reeves gang's ancestral home, Ash Hollow, a ghost town 30 miles north, abandoned after a smallpox outbreak and erased from official maps. A perfect hideout for outlaws. Sarah stripped off her shopkeeper's clothes. From the trunk, she pulled riding pants, a dark shirt, a leather vest, the clothing of a hunter. She strapped on the silver-plated Remingtons, their weight both foreign and familiar, against her hips. Lastly, she took the red bandana, running the fabric between her fingers. For 20 years, she had been Sarah Blackwood, widow and shopkeeper. Tonight, Red Rose would ride again. She didn't take her own horse, too recognizable. Instead, she borrowed a black gelding from the livery leaving payment and a note claiming urgent family business. By midnight, she was miles from Pine Ridge, following a trail that only existed in her memory and on her map. The moon lit her path through pine forests and across rocky plateaus. She rode hard, pushing the horse as much as she dared. Every second counted. The Reeves gang wasn't known for gentleness with their captives. Dawn was breaking when she reached the ridge overlooking Ash Hollow. The ghost town lay in the valley below, shrouded in morning mist. Buildings sagged like rotting teeth. The church steeple listed to one side. Nature reclaiming what man had abandoned. But there were signs of occupation. Smoke rose from one chimney. 3 horses stood in what had once been the town's corral. Sarah dismounted, tethering her horse to a pine tree. From her saddlebag, she retrieved a spyglass. Through it, she observed 2 men moving between buildings. Armed, alert, sentries. She recognized one immediately. Lucas Reeves. The youngest of the 3 Reeves brothers, but perhaps the most dangerous. Cold-eyed and calculating where his brothers were brutal and impulsive. Sarah had never hunted the Reeves gang during her Red Rose days. They had been small-time, then hardly worth the bounty. Now she regretted that oversight, as she watched a 3rd man emerge from the largest building, once the town's hotel. He dragged someone with him, a girl with copper hair, hands bound before her. "Emily!" Sarah breathed, her heart clenching. Her daughter's face was bruised, but her posture remained defiant. The man shoved her toward an outhouse behind the hotel, then took up position outside the door. Sarah's fingers tightened around the spyglass. 3 men that she could see, possibly more inside. She needed to be methodical, strategic. The old hunter's instincts stirred within her. She was outnumbered and outgunned. Attempting a rescue alone would be suicide. She needed help. Reluctantly, she backed away from the ridge. She would return to Pine Ridge, gather supplies, and send a telegram. There were people who owed Red Rose favors, people who might still answer her call despite the years of silence. But as she turned to leave, something caught her eye. A weather-beaten sign at the edge of the ghost town. Most of the letters had faded, but she could still make out ASHLLW EST 1849. Beneath it, someone had recently carved a message into the wood: "The past never stays buried." Sarah's blood ran cold. This wasn't a random kidnapping. This wasn't about ransom. Someone knew who she was. Someone had taken Emily to draw her out. This was about Red Rose. Sarah didn't return to Pine Ridge. Instead, she rode east for 6 hours to the settlement of Cooper's Crossing, small enough that her face wouldn't be recognized, large enough to have a telegraph office. She sent 3 telegrams to different locations across the territory. Each contained the same message, RR calling. Ash Hollow, life or death. She signed each with a simple drawing of a rose. Then she resupplied ammunition, preserved food, medical supplies, and whiskey. The shop owner raised an eyebrow at her purchases, but the extra coins she slid across the counter silenced any questions. By dusk, she was back on the trail, making camp in a sheltered ravine 5 miles from Ash Hollow. Close enough to observe, far enough to remain undetected. As night fell, Sarah cleaned her revolvers by firelight. The familiar routine brought back memories, some she had tried to forget, others she had clung to on lonely nights. Nights around campfires with her posse. The camaraderie, the shared purpose, and Matthew always by her side, tempering her harder edges with his gentle wisdom. "I'll find her," she whispered to the stars as if Matthew could hear her. "I'll bring our girl home." She slept with one eye open, waking at the slightest sound. When first light painted the eastern sky, she returned to the ridge overlooking Ash Hollow. The situation remained unchanged. 3 men visible. Emily taken out briefly for necessities, then returned to the hotel. No chance for rescue yet. Sarah settled in to wait. If her telegrams reached their destinations, help would come. If not, she would need to formulate a plan alone. Midday brought movement. A rider approached from the north. Sarah trained her spyglass on him. An older man, white-bearded, dignified despite his trail-worn appearance. Judge Crawford. Sarah's breath caught. Judge Emmett Crawford had been a power in the Wyoming Territory for decades, a circuit judge known for harsh sentences and unwavering commitment to his own version of justice. She had worked with him occasionally during her Red Rose days, bringing in wanted men for him to sentence. What was he doing with the Reeves gang? She watched as Crawford dismounted at the hotel and was greeted by Lucas Reeves with something resembling respect. The 2 men spoke briefly before entering the building. Whatever their business, it involved Emily. Sarah's mind raced. Crawford's presence complicated matters. He was connected, powerful. If he was involved in Emily's kidnapping, this conspiracy ran deeper than she had imagined. Hours passed. The sun began its descent. Sarah was considering her options for the night when she spotted movement on the trail below. A lone rider approaching Ash Hollow at a leisurely pace. The spyglass revealed a familiar face, though aged by 20 years and half hidden behind a graying beard. Jackson. Thomas Lightning Jackson. Once her right-hand man in the Red Rose gang. The fastest draw she'd ever seen. A man who had saved her life more times than she could count. He rode openly into Ash Hollow, hands visible, no hint of subterfuge. The sentries trained their rifles on him, but didn't fire. Words were exchanged. After a tense moment, they escorted him to the hotel. Sarah's heart pounded. Had Jackson received her telegram, or was he already working with the Reeves gang? She hadn't seen him since Eagles Canyon. After the massacre, the posse had scattered, some like her seeking anonymity, others continuing the violent life without the Red Rose name. An hour later, as twilight deepened into night, another figure emerged from the shadows of the pine forest. This one didn't approach on the trail, but moved with the stealth of a ghost through the underbrush. Sarah almost missed him until he deliberately stepped into a patch of moonlight and looked directly toward her position on the ridge. Though she was well concealed, he raised a hand in silent greeting. Martinez. Gabriel Martinez, the tracker, the quietest member of her former posse, a man who could read sign like others read books. Mexican by birth, he had joined the Red Rose gang after she saved him from a lynching by a group of Texas Rangers. Sarah watched as he melted back into the forest, circling around to approach Ash Hollow from the south. Unlike Jackson, he wouldn't announce himself. He would observe, gather intelligence, find weaknesses. 2 of her old posse had arrived. The 3rd would be the most difficult. Sarah made her way back to her camp. As she approached, she sensed rather than saw the presence waiting for her. Her hand moved to her revolver. After 20 years, that's how you greet an old friend. A raspy voice called from the darkness. A match flared, illuminating a gaunt face with sunken eyes and a bristling mustache. "Doc?" Sarah acknowledged, relaxing her stance. Dr. Alistair Miller sat on a log beside her extinguished campfire, a bottle of whiskey in his hand. Once the Rose Gang's medic and voice of reason now, he looked like a man who had seen too many ghosts. "When I got your telegram, I thought I was hallucinating again," he said, taking a pull from the bottle. "Red Rose back from the dead." "Not back," Sarah clarified, kneeling to rebuild the fire. "Just borrowed for a time." Doc studied her face in the growing firelight. "You've aged well considering." "Considering what?" "Considering you died at Eagles Canyon along with the rest of us?" His voice carried the weight of 2 decades of pain. "Some deaths just take longer than others." Sarah didn't respond immediately. The fire caught flames, licking at the dry kindling. "They have my daughter," she finally said. Doc's eyebrows rose. "Matthew's child." Sarah nodded. "How old?" 16. Doc's hollow laugh held no humor. 16 years. Long enough to grow a child, not long enough to outrun the past. He offered her the bottle. "But what's the plan, Rose?" She took a drink, the whiskey burning a familiar path down her throat. "Jackson's inside. Martinez is scouting. We need to know why they took her. Why now?" "And why Judge Crawford is involved," Doc added. Sarah's head snapped up. "You saw him? Rode in with his escort yesterday. Been watching this place for 2 days before your telegram arrived. What's his connection to the Reeves gang?" Doc shrugged. "Don't know. But after Eagles Canyon rumors said he was furious with you. Something about exceeding your authority. Going too far." He paused. "There was talk he put bounties on the remaining Rose Gang members." "Quietly, of course. Nothing official." Sarah absorbed this information. Crawford had always been ruthless in his pursuit of justice. If he blamed her for Eagles Canyon. "We need to get Emily out," she said, returning to the immediate concern. "Tonight, if possible. A 4 against however many they have inside, not good odds. We've faced worse." Doc's expression darkened. "And lost, as I recall." Silence fell between them, filled only by the crackling fire and the distant howl of a coyote. "There's something you should see," Doc finally said, reaching into his coat. He produced a sealed envelope, yellowed with age. "After you disappeared, I went back to Eagles Canyon. Found this in the remains of Matthew's saddlebag." Sarah took the envelope with trembling hands. Her name was written on it in Matthew's familiar script. "You've had this for 20 years, she asked, voice barely above a whisper. "Never knew where to find you, or if you wanted to be found." Doc stood, joints cracking. "I'll take first watch. Read it, then get some sleep. Tomorrow we bring your girl home." He moved away, leaving Sarah alone with the letter and her memories. She broke the wax seal with her thumbnail. Inside was a single page stained with what might have been blood. Matthew's final words to her. "My dearest Sarah, if you're reading this, then my fears have come to pass. I write this the night before we ride to Eagles Canyon. There's something about this hunt that doesn't sit right. Crawford's information is too convenient. His insistence that we move immediately too urgent. I tried to tell you my concerns, but you were so determined to bring in Foster. I've been making inquiries about the judge. There are whispers, Sarah. Whispers about land deals with the railroad, about needing certain tribal territories cleared, about using bounty hunters as unwitting pawns. Foster may be innocent. The evidence against him may be fabricated. If so, we ride into a trap tomorrow. Not just for us, but for the people at Eagles Canyon. If I don't survive to tell you this in person, know that I have hidden proof of Crawford's dealings in Ash Hollow, in the old church where we first met, beneath the 3rd floorboard from the altar on the right. I love you more than life itself. Whatever happens tomorrow, remember that. Forever yours." Matthew. Sarah's hands shook as she read the letter a second time, then a third. Tears spilled silently down her weathered cheeks. All these years she had carried the guilt of Eagles Canyon, the innocent blood. Matthew's death. She had believed it was her recklessness, her pursuit of bounty and reputation that had led to the tragedy. But if Matthew was right, they had been manipulated, used as instruments in Crawford's scheme. The massacre, the deaths, all engineered by a man sworn to uphold justice. And now, 20 years later, he had taken her daughter. Sarah folded the letter carefully and tucked it inside her vest close to her heart. A cold clarity settled over her, burning away the fog of doubt and regret. This wasn't just about rescuing Emily anymore. This was about the truth. This was about justice. Red Rose would ride one last time, and this time she would finish what should have ended 20 years ago at Eagles Canyon. She just prayed her daughter would forgive her for the blood that was about to be spilled. Dawn broke over Ash Hollow, painting the ghost town in shades of rust and gold. Sarah stood on the ridge spyglass to her eye, surveying what had once been the most prosperous settlement in the territory. 4 men on patrol, Martinez reported, materializing silently beside her. His face was more weathered now, deep lines carved by sun and sorrow, but his eyes remained sharp as obsidian. 2 at the hotel entrance, 1 on the roof, 1 circling the perimeter. "Jackson," Sarah asked. "Inside. They're treating him as a guest, not a prisoner. He shared whiskey with Lucas Reeves last night." Sarah lowered the spyglass. "And Crawford?" "Left at first light with 2 riders. Said he'd return by sundown." Martinez hesitated. "There's something else. A woman with the Reeves gang, kept separate from your daughter. Blonde, treated well." Sarah's brow furrowed. "Jackson's wife?" Martinez nodded. "Mary. Thought she died of fever 3 winters ago. At least that's what I heard." "So that's the hold they have on him." Sarah's jaw tightened. "We need to get inside that hotel." Doc approached, rifle slung over his shoulder. 20 years had turned his once steady surgeon's hands into trembling appendages, useful only when wrapped around a bottle. "You won't like my suggestion," he said, voice raspy from whiskey and too many sleepless nights. "Tell me anyway." "Surrender." Sarah stared at him. "What?" "They want Red Rose. Give her to them." Doc gestured toward the ghost town. "Walk in there hands up. While they're focused on you, Martinez and I can locate and extract your daughter. And leave me to hang." Sarah's voice held no fear, only calculation. "You have your revolvers. Wait for the right moment." Doc fixed her with a hollow gaze. "Unless you've lost your touch after 20 years of weighing coffee beans." Sarah studied the ghost town below, weighing options against risks. The familiar cold clarity of the hunt settled over her. "No," she decided. "Too unpredictable. We need more information." Martinez, find a way into the hotel. Learn the layout, guard rotations where they're keeping Emily. Doc, prepare medical supplies. If this turns bloody— "When it turns bloody," Doc corrected. "I want to be ready to move fast." Martinez nodded and melted into the forest. Doc shuffled away, muttering about suicide missions and ghosts who never learned. Left alone, Sarah removed the red bandana from her pocket, running the faded fabric between her fingers. She hadn't worn it yet, hadn't fully embraced the mantle of Red Rose. Part of her still clung to Sarah Blackwood, the widow who baked bread in balanced ledgers. But with each passing hour, that woman faded like morning mist under a rising sun. She tucked the bandana away and descended toward Ash Hollow, keeping to the shadows. There was somewhere she needed to go first, somewhere Matthew had pointed her. The old church stood at the edge of town, its steeple listing dangerously. Weathered boards groaned under her careful steps as she slipped through a broken window. Dust motes danced in shafts of light that penetrated the collapsed roof. This was where she and Matthew had first met, a young bounty hunter attending Sunday service while tracking a counterfeiter. Matthew, the son of a preacher, playing the organ, their eyes meeting across the pews, a beginning that had led inevitably to Eagles Canyon. Beneath the 3rd floorboard from the altar on the right, Sarah knelt by the decaying altar. The floorboard came loose with surprising ease, as if recently disturbed. Beneath it lay an oilskin packet untouched by the years. Inside she found documents, land deeds, railroad contracts, a letter on official judicial stationery detailing payments to remove obstacles to progress, maps of tribal lands with coal deposits marked, and a list of named settlers who had refused to sell tribal leaders who opposed the railroad. Among them, Rattlesnake Foster. The pieces came together with sickening clarity. Crawford had engineered the entire thing, created false evidence against Foster, knowing the bounty would draw Red Rose, positioned her posse and the tribe for maximum bloodshed, a massacre that would justify military intervention and forced relocation, all for land, for coal, for money. And Matthew had discovered it all, had tried to warn her. Sarah's hands trembled not with fear, but with rage. 12 innocent lives, her husband, her own soul, all sacrificed on the altar of Crawford's greed. She carefully rewrapped the documents. This was the evidence that could destroy Crawford. but it would also expose Red Rose's role in the massacre. Sarah Blackwood would be revealed. Her life in Pine Ridge would end, a price she was now willing to pay. A floorboard creaked behind her. Sarah whirled, revolvers appearing in her hands with fluid grace. 20 years might have passed, but some instincts never died. A tall figure stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the morning light. Broad-shouldered, imposing, a shotgun held non-threateningly at his side. "You still draw faster than rattlesnakes strike," the man said, voice deep and melodic, accented with the cadence of his native tongue. Sarah lowered her weapon slowly. "Thunder!" He stepped into the church sunlight, revealing copper skin, lined with experience, long, gray-streaked hair, tied back with a leather thong. Adam Thunder Cloud, the Shoshone warrior who had joined her posse after she saved his sister from a gang of rustlers. The only one of her former companions who had witnessed Eagles Canyon from both sides. "Did not think I would come," he stated rather than asked. "Figured you had the most reason to stay away." The Thunder moved farther into the church, each step deliberate. "Received your message. Followed your trail from Cooper's Crossing. My daughter, I know why you are here." Thunder's dark eyes held hers. "Question is, do you?" Sarah tucked the documents into her vest. "They took my child. And you will take her back." Thunder nodded. "But then, when she is safe, what will Red Rose do about the ghosts that never rest?" Sarah had no immediate answer. In truth, she hadn't thought beyond rescuing Emily. Thunder reached the altar, running weathered fingers over the scarred wood. "I returned to my people after Eagles Canyon, told them what happened, how the Red Rose gang was deceived, how Matthew died trying to prevent bloodshed." Sarah's breath caught. "You knew." "Matthew came to me the night before, shared his suspicions about Crawford, asked me to help him prevent conflict." Thunder's expression darkened. "I was too slow. By the time I reached the canyon, the killing had begun." Silence stretched between them, filled with the weight of shared history. "The tribal council named me peacemaker after Eagles Canyon," Thunder continued. 20 years I have walked between your world and mine, seeking justice without more bloodshed." His eyes pierced hers. "Will Red Rose undo that work? Will she drown this land in blood for revenge?" "This isn't about revenge," Sarah insisted. "It's about saving Emily." Is it?" Thunder challenged. "Then why seek Crawford's secrets? Why arm yourself with evidence of his crimes?" Sarah had no answer that wouldn't expose the rage burning in her heart, the desire to make Crawford pay for everything he had taken from her. Thunder stepped closer. "To save your daughter, Sarah Blackwood must die, and Red Rose must truly live again." His voice dropped to a whisper. "But to find peace afterward, Red Rose must die. Permanently." "In what are you saying? That rescuing the child is only the beginning of your journey?" Thunder placed a hand on her shoulder. "You seek my help. I will give it. But first you must complete the ritual of naming. I don't have time for one. Without it you enter battle divided. Half Sarah, half Rose. Weak, uncertain." His grip tightened. "To defeat Crawford, you must be whole." Sarah wanted to argue, but something in Thunder's eyes stopped her. Of all her former companions, he had always seen most clearly into her soul. "What must I do?" Thunder produced a small leather pouch. From it he extracted a stone knife, its edge honed sharp, and a vial of red pigment. "Speak the names of those who died at Eagles Canyon, all 12. With each name, mark yourself. Make their memory part of your flesh, so you carry them into battle." Sarah's eyes widened. "You want me to carve their names into my skin?" "Not their names, their memory, the weight of what was done." Thunder held out the knife. "This is the way of my people when great wrong must be acknowledged before great battle." Sarah stared at the blade, understanding now what Thunder meant about being whole. For 20 years she had tried to bury Red Rose to pretend those deaths weren't on her conscience. But they were. They always had been. She took the knife. Thunder nodded. "I will gather the others. When the sun reaches its highest point, come to the ridge. We will make our plan." He turned to leave, then paused. "Choose carefully where you carry these marks, Red Rose. Some burdens are meant to be visible to all. Others are only for ourselves to know." After he departed, Sarah knelt in the dust of the abandoned church. She opened her shirt collar, exposing the pale skin over her heart. With steady hands, she pressed the blade to flesh and began to whisper names. Joseph Blackfoot, elder of the Eagle Canyon Band. The knife bit. Blood welled. Mary, running water medicine woman? Another cut. Pain blossomed, sharp and clarifying. One by one, she spoke the names of all who had fallen that day, marking herself with their memory. When she finished, she mixed her blood with the red pigment Thunder had left and worked it into the wounds, ensuring they would scar visibly. The pain was excruciating, cleansing. By the time she finished, Sarah Blackwood had fully given way to Red Rose. Not the legend or the killer, but something new, a woman who carried her guilt openly, rather than buried beneath layers of deception. She bound her wounds, replaced her shirt, and exited the church. The sun had nearly reached its zenith. It was time to join the others and form a plan to save Emily. As she walked, she tied the red bandana around her neck for the first time in 20 years. Red Rose had returned. Thunder led them through Rattlesnake Pass at dusk, a narrow trail that wound between sheer cliff faces, barely wide enough for a horse to navigate. The path would take them to the rear of Ash Hollow, bypassing the sentries posted on the main approaches. Few know this trail exists, Thunder explained as they dismounted to lead their horses through a particularly treacherous section. My people used it to trade with settlers before the troubles began. Sarah now fully embodied as Red Rose followed close behind, the wounds over her heart, throbbing with each heartbeat. Doc Martinez and Thunder completed their small company. Jackson remained inside Ash Hollow, either a willing conspirator or a prisoner of his own past. I counted 8 men total, Martinez reported as they paused to rest the horses. 4 on regular patrol, 2 guarding the girl in the second-floor corner room. Lucas Reeves and 1 other inside with Jackson. The woman Mary is kept in a separate room under lock and key. Crawford, Red Rose asked, returned an hour ago with 3 riders. They brought supplies, ammunition, extra horses. They're preparing to move, Doc observed, probably at first light. Red Rose considered this information. We need to get inside tonight. Martinez, you'll create a distraction at the old smithy on the north edge of town, something big enough to draw the perimeter guards. Doc, you take position in the livery with your rifle. When the guards respond to Martinez's distraction, provide cover fire. Thunder and I will enter through the hotel's rear entrance. And Jackson? Thunder asked. Red Rose's expression hardened. If he stands with us, he lives. If he stands with them? She let the implication hang in the air. They continued through the pass as daylight faded. By the time they reached the outskirts of Ash Hollow, night had fallen. A slivered moon offered minimal illumination, perfect for their purposes. We move in 1 hour, Red Rose decided, checking her revolvers. Get into position. As Martinez and Doc slipped away into the darkness, Thunder placed a hand on Red Rose's arm. The woman you seek to rescue is not just your daughter, he said quietly. She is also Red Rose's daughter. She carries both your blood and your husband's. She may not be what you expect. Meaning the apple never falls far from the tree. Thunder's eyes gleamed in the darkness. Be prepared for what you may find. Before Red Rose could question him further, he moved away, blending into the shadows with preternatural ease. From her position behind the hotel's coal shed, Red Rose peered through a gap between weathered boards. The back door was guarded by a single-man rifle propped against the wall as he smoked a cigarette. Inside, lamplight glowed in several windows, including one on the second floor that she suspected was Emily's prison. Minutes crawled by. Red Rose fought the urge to act immediately to storm the building and cut down anyone between her and her daughter. Patience had never been her virtue, but experience had taught her its value. A thunderous explosion shattered the night. Martinez had ignited the smithy's forge, the built-up coal dust creating a spectacular fireball that illuminated half the town. Shouts erupted from the front of the hotel. The guard at the back door snatched up his rifle and hesitated, torn between investigating and maintaining his post. A second explosion decided him. He raced toward the commotion. Red Rose didn't waste the opportunity. She sprinted across the open ground, Thunder close behind. They reached the back door seconds before gunfire erupted from the direction of the livery dock, providing cover, as planned. The door was locked. Thunder produced a heavy knife and worked it between the door jamb and lock. Wood splintered. They were in. The hotel's kitchen was deserted, food half prepared on the cutting board. Red Rose led the way, moving through the dim interior with the confidence of a predator. A narrow staircase led to the second floor. 2 guards at her door, she whispered to Thunder. He nodded. From within his buckskin shirt, he produced a small clay pot. Sleeping dust. One breath, they dream for hours. Red Rose smiled grimly. Just like old times. They ascended the stairs, pausing at the top. Voices drifted down the hallway, the guards discussing the commotion outside. Red Rose flattened herself against the wall, peering around the corner. 2 men stood outside a door midway down the corridor, rifles ready. Thunder uncorked the clay pot and blew gently across its opening. A fine dust drifted down the hallway, invisible in the dim light. Seconds later, one guard sneezed, then the other. They rubbed their eyes, growing visibly disoriented. Within a minute, both slumped to the floor, breathing deeply in unnatural slumber. Won't last long, Thunder warned. The dust is old. Red Rose moved quickly down the hall, stepping over the unconscious guards. She tried the door. Locked. One of the guards had a key ring on his belt. She snatched it, finding the right key on the 3rd try. The door swung open. A young woman sat on a narrow bed, a metal shard clutched in her fist, ready to strike. Her copper hair was tangled, her face bruised, but her eyes blazed with defiance. "Emily!" Red Rose breathed. Recognition dawned in the girl's eyes. "Mama!" Emily lowered the makeshift weapon, staring at the transformed woman before her. The riding clothes, the guns, the red bandana. "You look different," she said, voice steady despite her circumstances. "It's still me." Red Rose moved into the room, quickly checking Emily for injuries. Aside from the bruise on her cheek and rope burns on her wrists, she appeared unharmed. "Can you walk?" Emily nodded. "I've been ready to escape for 2 days." She held up the metal shard, a piece of bed spring she'd worked loose. Was waiting for the right moment. Pride swelled in Red Rose's chest. "We need to move. Now." "I will wait." Emily grabbed her arm. "There's a woman. Next room. They're using her to control some man. Jackson, I think they called him." Red Rose hesitated. Saving Mary would complicate their escape, but leaving her behind wasn't an option she could live with. "Thunder, take Emily down the back stairs. Get her to the horses. I'll get Mary and meet you there." Thunder nodded, gesturing for Emily to follow him. "No." Emily's voice was firm. "I'm staying with you, Mama." Before Red Rose could argue, gunfire erupted from downstairs. Heavy boots pounded on the wooden floor. Their distraction had been discovered. "Change of plan," Red Rose said, drawing her revolvers. "Thunder, get Mary. Room next door. Emily stays with me." Thunder disappeared into the hallway as Red Rose moved to the window, assessing potential escape routes. A sloped roof extended below the window, dropping to a short fall that could be managed. "Mama," Emily said quietly. "Who are you really?" Red Rose turned to her daughter, seeing the questions in her eyes. This wasn't how she had planned to reveal her past, but there was no time for gentle truths. "I'm the woman who's getting you home," she said. "The rest will have to wait." Shouts came from the stairwell. Their presence had been discovered. "Out the window," Red Rose ordered. "Now." Emily moved with surprising agility, sliding the window open and climbing out onto the sloped roof. Red Rose followed, pulling the window closed behind them. They crouched low, inching toward the edge. A shot rang out. Splinters erupted from the wood near Emily's hand. Red Rose whirled, spotting a figure at the window of the adjacent room. Her revolver roared twice in rapid succession. The shooter disappeared. "Move!" she urged Emily. They reached the edge of the roof. A short drop to the ground below, risky but manageable. "Jump and roll," Red Rose instructed. "Like I taught you when you were little." Emily nodded, gathering herself. She leaped, landing with the practiced roll Red Rose had shown her during childhood games that now revealed their true purpose, preparation disguised as play. Red Rose followed, landing harder than intended. Pain lanced through her ankle. Not broken, but sprained. She gritted her teeth and straightened. More shots sounded from inside the hotel. Thunder and Mary. They needed to provide cover. "Stay low, follow me," Red Rose told Emily, limping toward the corner of the building. From their new position, they could see the back door. Armed men converged on the hotel from the direction of the smithy. Martinez had apparently retreated, his distraction complete. "Can you shoot?" Red Rose asked, offering Emily one of her revolvers. The girl took the weapon with surprising confidence. You taught me. Remember when I was 12? Said every woman should know how to protect herself. Another wave of pride swept through Red Rose. She had raised her daughter to be strong even while trying to shield her from the violence of her own past. Cover the door. 3 shots, then move to that water trough. She pointed to their next position. I'll meet you there. Emily nodded, a new understanding passing between them. Not just mother and daughter now, but allies, partners. The back door burst open. Thunder emerged, supporting a blonde woman who stumbled with each step. Behind them, Jackson backed through the doorway, firing into the hotel interior. Red Rose and Emily opened fire simultaneously, providing cover. Their shots forced the pursuing gunmen to retreat inside temporarily. Move! Red Rose shouted to Thunder. He half-carried Mary toward the stable, where their horses waited. Jackson spotted Red Rose and Emily, his expression cycling through shock, recognition, and grim determination. He sprinted toward them, bullets kicking up dust at his heels. Rose! He gasped, reaching their position. They know! Crawford knows everything. Save it, she snapped. Get to the horses. Emily had already relocated to the water trough as instructed. Red Rose followed her injured ankle, slowing her. A bullet whined past her ear. She returned fire without looking, her body remembering what her mind had tried to forget. Jackson provided covering fire as they retreated toward the stable. Inside, they found Thunder helping Mary onto a horse. Doc had joined them, his rifle smoking from recent use. Martinez, Red Rose asked, helping Emily mount. Made it out, Doc confirmed. Circling around to cover our escape. Red Rose swung into the saddle, ignoring the pain in her ankle. We ride for Rattlesnake Pass. Single file. Thunder leads. As they prepared to depart, Jackson approached Mary's horse. The woman's face was gaunt, her eyes hollow, but she was undeniably alive. Mary, Jackson whispered, reaching for her hand. She stared at him without recognition. Who are you? Jackson recoiled as if struck. Mary, it's me. Thomas. They've been drugging her, Thunder explained quietly. Her mind wanders. Before Jackson could respond, gunfire erupted outside. Bullets splintered the stable walls. No time, Red Rose ordered. Ride. They burst from the stable's rear entrance, a thunder of hooves in the darkness. Behind them, men shouted orders. More gunfire. Then a voice cut through the chaos, amplified by fury. Rose, I know it's you. This isn't over. Lucas Reeves. His voice faded as they galloped into the night, but his promise lingered. This wasn't over. It had only just begun. They rode hard for 3 hours, following Thunder through terrain so rugged that only a native guide could navigate it in darkness. When the horses could go no further, they made camp in a box canyon that offered both water and defensible positions. Doc tended to Mary, who drifted between moments of lucidity and confused rambling. Jackson hovered nearby, his face a mask of guilt and grief. Martinez established a perimeter, setting simple alarms that would alert them to pursuit. Red Rose built a small, smokeless fire, then examined Emily's injuries. The girl submitted to the attention with stoic dignity that reminded Red Rose powerfully of Matthew. That bandana, Emily said quietly, gesturing to the red cloth around her mother's neck. I've seen it before, in your trunk, the one you think I don't know about. Red Rose's hand stilled. You went through my things. 3 years ago, found the guns too, and the wanted posters. Emily met her gaze without flinching. I've known something wasn't right for a long time, Mama. Just didn't know what. I wanted to protect you. From what? The truth. Emily's voice held no accusation, only curiosity. Or from who you really are. Before Red Rose could answer, Thunder approached. We should continue this journey in spirit while our bodies rest, he said, producing a small bundle from his saddlebag. The cleansing is not complete. Emily looked between them. What cleansing? Your mother carries the names of the dead. Thunder explained, unwrapping the bundle to reveal more of the red pigment. Now she must face her living legacy. Emily doesn't need to be part of this, Red Rose objected. I think I do. Emily straightened. If this is about you, about us, then I should know. Thunder nodded approval. The daughter of Red Rose has the right to witness. He prepared a small mixture, adding water to the pigment until it formed a paste. With practiced motions, he applied it to Red Rose's forehead in a pattern of swirling lines. The paths we walk, he explained to Emily, Some straight, some winding, all connected. Next, he traced a line from Red Rose's heart, where she had carved the 12 names to her hands. The weight we carry becomes the strength we wield. Finally, he drew Red Rose's revolvers and laid them on the ground between them. Your mother was the most feared bounty hunter in the territories, Thunder told Emily. Red Rose. She brought justice where law failed. Sometimes that justice was clean. Other times, he trailed off. I killed people, Red Rose said bluntly, refusing to soften the truth. Mostly bad men who deserved it. Sometimes, she swallowed hard, sometimes I was wrong. Emily absorbed this without visible reaction. And my father, Matthew, was my conscience, the best of us. Red Rose's voice softened. He died trying to prevent a massacre that I helped cause. Only the guilty cause, Thunder corrected. Crawford laid the trap. We all walked into it. Emily looked around the fire at the gathered faces. You were all part of this, my mother's gang. We were family. Doc spoke up from where he tended Mary. Broken people who found purpose together. Until Eagles Canyon, Martinez added softly, when everything shattered. The Thunder raised a hand for silence. The past shapes us but does not define us. What matters is the choice before us now. He turned to Red Rose. Crawford will not stop. The evidence you found threatens everything he has built. He will hunt you, hunt your daughter, until he buries the truth forever. Then we take the fight to him, Red Rose decided. End this once and for all. And become what you were before, Thunder challenged. The killer who leaves roses on corpses, is that what you want your daughter to see? Red Rose fell silent, the question cutting deep. For 20 years, she had built a life defined by peace and nurturing. Now, in a matter of days, she had reclaimed the mantle of violence as easily as putting on an old coat. There has to be another way, she said finally, one that brings Crawford to justice without more bloodshed. There is. All eyes turned to Jackson, who had been silent since their escape. He approached the fire, his weathered face gaunt in the flickering light. Calvin Reed, the federal marshal, Doc scoffed. He's Crawford's man. No, Jackson shook his head. He was, but not anymore. Reed's been building a case against Crawford for years. Land fraud, bribery, murder. He needs witnesses. And you know this how? Red Rose asked, suspicion evident. Jackson met her gaze without flinching. Because I've been helping him. That's the real reason I was in Ash Hollow. Not for Mary, though I believed she was alive. I was feeding information to Reed. Silence descended on the group as they processed this revelation. A spy, Martinez murmured. Playing both sides. Not both, Jackson insisted. Just one justice. Real justice, not Crawford's twisted version. He turned to Red Rose. Reed is in Sawyer's Crossing, 2 days' ride from here. He has the authority to arrest Crawford, but he needs the evidence you found in our testimony. Red Rose considered this new information. A legal solution would mean no more bloodshed, no more sins to carry, but it also meant exposing her past to the world, the end of Sarah Blackwood. What would happen to us? Emily asked her pragmatic question, cutting to the heart of the matter. If this marshal gets his evidence and arrests the judge, what happens to my mother, to all of you? Jackson sighed. Immunity, maybe, for testimony against a bigger fish, or maybe prison. That's the gamble. Emily turned to her mother. Is that why you never told me? Because you might go to prison for what you did. I never told you because I was ashamed, Red Rose admitted. Because I wanted you to be better than I was. To live without violence, shaping every choice you make. Emily was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached out and touched the red bandana around her mother's neck. Tell me about Red Rose, she said softly. All of it. The truth. And so as the fire burned low and the night deepened around them, Red Rose finally shared her story with her daughter, the early years of poverty and abuse that had forged her into a weapon. Meeting Matthew, whose gentle strength had given her purpose beyond revenge. Forming the Rose Gang, bringing outlaws to justice when the law wouldn't or couldn't. And finally, Eagles Canyon, the massacre that had broken them all. Thunder added his perspective. The manipulation by Crawford, the fabricated evidence against Foster, the land grab disguised as justice. When the tale was done, Emily sat in silence, processing all she had learned. The others waited, recognizing that this moment, more than any confrontation with Crawford, would determine Red Rose's future. "You've spent my whole life protecting me from this," Emily finally said. "From who you were. From what happened." She looked around at the assembled faces, these strangers who shared a blood-soaked history with her mother. "But it shaped me anyway, didn't it? All those shooting lessons, the tracking you taught me, how to move silently through the woods." Red Rose nodded slowly. "Some habits I couldn't break. Some skills seemed prudent to pass on. You thought you were preparing me for a world that might turn dangerous." Emily's voice grew stronger. "But you were really preparing me for this moment, for when your past finally caught up to us." She stood, her young face set with determination that made her look startlingly like her father. "We go to this, Marshal," she declared. "We bring Crawford to justice, real justice, not revenge." She looked directly at her mother. "And then we go home and start over, with the truth between us." Red Rose felt tears sting her eyes, the first she had shed since finding Matthew's letter. Not tears of grief or guilt, but of pride and wonder at the woman her daughter had become. "Sawyer's Crossing it is," she agreed, standing to face the others. "We ride at first light." As the others settled into sleep, Red Rose took first watch, climbing to a rocky outcrop that overlooked their camp. The night sky stretched above her, stars scattered like diamond dust across black velvet. Footsteps approached. Not the silent tread of thunder or Martinez, but the deliberate steps of someone who wanted her to know they were coming. Jackson settled beside her, his rifle across his knees. "She's a fine girl," he said after a companionable silence. "Matthew would be proud." "He would," Red Rose agreed. Then, addressing the question that had lingered since Ash Hollow, "Was Mary ever really there? Or was it all Crawford's manipulation?" Jackson stared into the darkness. "She was there. I saw her, spoke to her." His voice cracked slightly. "But the woman we rescued, I don't know who she is. Not my Mary." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. I've been chasing ghosts for years." He hesitated. "Rose, there's something you should know about Calvin Reed." She turned to him, alert. "What?" "He's not just any federal marshal. He was in Eagles Canyon that day, undercover investigating Crawford even then." Jackson's voice dropped. "He tried to warn Matthew about the setup, but was too late." "Ikram," Red Rose's breath caught. "He was there. Why didn't he stop it?" "One man against Crawford's private army." Jackson shook his head. "He barely escaped with his life. Got himself erased from all official reports afterward. Been working in the shadows ever since building his case." "Why didn't he contact me?" "He thought you were dead. We all did." Jackson met her gaze. "Finding you alive changes everything. Your testimony combined with Matthew's evidence could finally bring Crawford down." Red Rose absorbed this new information, reframing her understanding of that fateful day 20 years ago. Not just a massacre, but a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of territorial justice. A conspiracy one man had spent decades trying to unravel. "Will Reed protect Emily?" She asked, her priority unchanged despite the revelations. "With his life," Jackson promised, "and ours." They fell silent again, two aging warriors contemplating battles past and the one still to come. "Get some rest," Red Rose finally said. "I'll wake you for second watch." As Jackson departed, Red Rose returned her gaze to the stars. For the first time in 20 years, she felt the weight on her soul begin to lighten. Not because she had found absolution, some sins could never be washed away, but because she had found purpose again. Not revenge, justice. And perhaps when this was over, she might find something else she had thought forever lost. Peace. In the camp below, Emily slept, her face relaxed in the dying firelight. Thunder sat nearby, softly chanting a protective prayer. Doc had finally succumbed to exhaustion beside Mary's still form. Martinez maintained his vigilant patrol of the perimeter. Red Rose watched over them all, her revolvers ready, the red bandana, a splash of color against the night. They would ride for Sawyer's Crossing tomorrow. For a reckoning 20 years in the making. But for tonight, they were safe. For tonight, they were together. For tonight, that was enough. Sawyer's Crossing huddled between barren hills like a child seeking shelter from the wind. A collection of weathered buildings, a church with a listing steeple, and the inevitable saloon where men drowned memories they couldn't outrun. Red Rose studied the town through her spyglass from the concealment of a rocky ridge. Her small band had arrived just before dusk, having traveled 2 days across unforgiving terrain. Emily rode beside her, eyes taking in everything with a sharp assessment of youth. "How do we find this marshal?" Emily asked, voice low. "We don't," Red Rose answered, collapsing the spyglass. "He finds us." Thunder materialized from the scrub brush to their right. His ability to move silently had only improved with age. "3 riders entered town an hour ago," he reported. "One matches Jackson's description of Lucas Reeves." Red Rose's hand instinctively moved to her revolver. "Crawford, no sign. But there are men watching the trails. Professional men." Thunder's expression remained impassive. Not outlaws. Lawmen trying to look like ordinary travelers. "Reed's people or Crawford's?" Martinez asked, appearing as silently as Thunder had. "Both, perhaps." Thunder gazed toward the town. "This place smells of ambush and whispered betrayals." Red Rose weighed their options. The smart move would be to send a single scout, likely Martinez, to make contact with Reed while the others remained hidden. But time worked against them. If Crawford's men were already in Sawyer's Crossing, the judge himself couldn't be far behind. "Jackson," she called softly. He approached from where he had been tending the horses. 2 days of hard riding had deepened the lines in his face, but his eyes remained clear and alert. "Where does Reed stay when he's in town?" "Old mining office. East End." Jackson nodded toward a small building set apart from the others. "Has a view of all approaches. Man's careful." "He survived this long by being careful," Doc commented, joining them. He had been caring for Mary, whose condition had stabilized, but whose mind remained adrift in fog. "Like some of us should have been." Red Rose ignored the barb. "We need to get to Reed before Crawford realizes we're here. Martinez, circle around to the east. Check for watchers near that mining office. Doc, you and Thunder stay with Mary in that arroyo we passed. Defensible position if things go wrong." "And us?" Emily asked. Red Rose met her daughter's steady gaze. "You stay with Doc and Thunder." Emily's chin lifted. "No, this isn't a debate. I'm the reason we're here," Emily insisted. "The reason you're wearing that bandana again. I'm not hiding while you risk everything." Red Rose recognized the stubborn set of her daughter's jaw. Matthew's determination in a feminine form. She also recognized the practical truth separating now could prove dangerous if they needed to flee quickly. "Fine," she conceded, "but you stay behind me and you do exactly as I say." Emily nodded, satisfied. "Jackson, you're with us," Red Rose continued. "You know Reed. He'll trust you." As the others moved to their positions, Doc pulled Red Rose aside. "You're walking into the lion's den," he said, voice low. "Crawford's had 20 years to prepare for this moment, and I've had 20 years to think about what I should have done differently." She checked her revolvers. "Keep Mary safe. If we're not back by morning, head for Mexico. I remember the drill." Doc's roomy eyes held hers. "Just make sure that girl comes back out with you. She's the best of all of us." Sumterworm. Red Rose couldn't argue with that assessment. "See you by sunrise." The descent into Sawyer's Crossing took them along a dry stream bed that offered concealment until the edge of town. Darkness had fallen completely by the time they reached the first scattered buildings. Red Rose led them through shadow-filled alleyways, avoiding the main street with its pools of lantern light. Martinez rejoined them near the livery stable. "2 men watching the mining office," he reported. "One on the roof of the building opposite, another in the alley beside it. Professional, well armed." "Crawford's men?" Red Rose asked. Martinez shook his head. "Move differently, more disciplined. Government men, I'd wager." "Reed's protection," Jackson suggested. "He would have brought backup." "Or it's a trap," Emily offered pragmatically. "Seems to me if everyone's watching one building so carefully, that's exactly where we shouldn't go." Red Rose smiled despite the tension. "Smart girl." "Takes after her mother," Jackson murmured. "Her father," Red Rose corrected. "Matthew was always the careful one." She studied the sparse layout of the town's eastern edge. The mining office stood alone, a squat building with a small porch. A single lamp burned in the window. The surrounding buildings, a cooperage, what appeared to be a tannery, and several small houses, created a loose semicircle around it. If Reed's in there, we need to signal him without alerting Crawford's men, Red Rose decided. Jackson, what's the recognition signal? He'd know. Jackson thought for a moment. 3 short knocks, pause 2 more. Old Treasury Department pattern. You and Martinez create a distraction on the main street, Red Rose instructed. Something noisy but not dangerous. Enough to draw attention without raising alarm. Emily and I will approach the rear of the building. Be careful, Jackson warned. Reed's jumpy these days. Shoots first when cornered. So do I, Red Rose replied. They separated Jackson and Martinez heading toward the main street, while Red Rose led Emily on a circuitous route through backyards and behind outbuildings. They reached the rear of the mining office without incident, crouching in the shadow of a woodpile. From the main street came the sound of breaking glass and raised voices, Jackson and Martinez creating their distraction. A moment later, one of the watchers Martinez had identified moved from his position, heading toward the commotion. Now, Red Rose whispered. They crept to the back door of the mining office. Red Rose drew her revolver, then knocked the pattern Jackson had described, 3 quick raps, pause 2 more. Silence. She repeated the pattern, the scrape of a chair from inside. Footsteps, the unmistakable sound of a shotgun being cocked. Who's there? A deep voice demanded. Someone who was at Eagles Canyon. Red Rose answered softly. Someone with Matthew Blackwood's evidence against Judge Crawford. Silence again. Then cautiously, Red Rose is dead. Rumors of my death were convenient. The door opened a crack, revealing nothing but darkness beyond. Enter slowly, the voice commanded. Hands where I can see them. Red Rose holstered her revolver and raised her hands. My daughter's with me. She's unarmed. Both of you, slow. Red Rose pushed the door wider with her foot, then stepped inside Emily, close behind. The room was dimly lit by a single oil lamp turned low. Standing against the far wall, a double-barreled shotgun leveled at them, was a man in his 50s. Tall, broad-shouldered, with iron gray hair, cropped short, and a neatly trimmed beard. His eyes were the cold blue of a winter sky, assessing and calculating. Close the door, he ordered. Emily complied, pulling the door shut behind them. The man studied Red Rose, his expression unreadable. You look different without blood on your hands, Red Rose. And you look different in a badge, Calvin Reed, she countered. Last time I saw you, you were posing as a horse trader in Cheyenne. The ghost of a smile touched his lips. Good memory. That was what, 22 years ago? 23. You sold Matthew a mare that went lame after a week. Reed lowered the shotgun. Jackson said you were alive. I didn't quite believe him. His gaze shifted to Emily. This is the daughter, Emily Blackwood. Red Rose confirmed. And I'd thank you to point that scattergun somewhere else while we talk. Reed set the shotgun on a desk cluttered with maps and papers. You have Matthew's evidence. Red Rose reached slowly into her vest and withdrew the oilskin packet she'd recovered from the church in Ash Hollow. 20 years buried under a floorboard. Still legible. Ottawa. Reed took the packet, examining the contents with the practiced eye of a lawman. His expression darkened as he read. This confirms everything, he said finally. Land fraud, bribery, orchestrating the massacre to clear tribal claims. He looked up. With this in your testimony, Crawford hangs. And what about us? Emily asked, speaking for the first time. What happens to my mother and the others? Reed regarded her thoughtfully. Smart question. You're Matthew's daughter, all right. He turned back to Red Rose. I've spent 20 years building this case, watching Crawford expand his empire of corruption across 3 territories. I can offer immunity to you and your former associates in exchange for testimony that puts him away. Full immunity, Red Rose pressed. For all of us, including Eagles Canyon. Reed's expression hardened. You were deceived at Eagles Canyon, used as a weapon against innocent people. That doesn't absolve the blood on your hands, but justice needs to focus on the puppet master, not the puppets. The front door burst open. Red Rose whirled, hand-dropping to her revolver, but stopped when she recognized Jackson. His expression was grim. Riders coming, he reported. At least 10. Crawford's at the lead. Reed cursed. Sooner than expected. One of his informants must have spotted you. He moved quickly to a back wall, pulling aside a cabinet to reveal a hidden door. There's a tunnel. Leads to the cooperage. Get the evidence and the girl out. I'll delay them. No, Red Rose said firmly. I'm done running. Crawford needs to answer for what he did. And he will, Reed assured her. But not if he kills you and burns that evidence before we can get it to a federal judge. Before Red Rose could argue further, Emily spoke up. He's right, Mama. We need to be smart, not brave. The wisdom in her young voice cut through Red Rose's instinct for confrontation. 20 years ago, she would have stayed to fight. Now she had more to protect than her pride. Martinez, get Emily through that tunnel, she ordered. Jackson and I will help Reed slow them down, then follow. I can fight, Emily protested. I know you can. That's why I need you to protect the evidence. Red Rose handed her the oilskin packet. Get this and yourself to safety. That's how we win. Emily recognized the logic, if reluctantly. She took the packet and moved toward the hidden door with Martinez. Reed distributed weapons from a locker beneath his desk. Crawford won't come in shooting. He'll try to make this look legal, a warrant for fugitives. But once he realizes we have the evidence, all bets are off. Red Rose checked her revolvers. How many men do you have in town? 4. Good men, but we're still outnumbered. Then we'd better make every shot count. Outside, horses approached at a canter. Commands were shouted, men dismounted. Remember, Reed said quietly, we need to delay, not defeat. Give the others time to get clear with the evidence. Red Rose nodded, taking position beside a window. Jackson stationed himself near the door. Reed moved to another window with a clear view of the street. A voice called from outside, amplified by authority and years of command. Calvin Reed, this is Judge Emmett Crawford. I have warrants for fugitives believed to be in your company. Send them out and we can resolve this peacefully. Reed glanced at Red Rose. And so it begins. He raised his voice to reply. Judge Crawford, what a surprise. I wasn't aware the territorial circuit brought you to Sawyer's Crossing these days. Special circumstances, Marshal, Crawford called back. I'm pursuing dangerous fugitives, the Red Rose gang to be precise. That's quite a ghost story, Judge. Red Rose has been dead for 20 years. Nevertheless, I have reliable information that Sarah Blackwood, the woman who once called herself Red Rose, is in your company, along with several of her former associates. They're wanted for kidnapping, assault on law officers, and murder. Reed's expression remained impassive. Serious charges. I'd be interested to see those warrants. Happy to oblige. May I approach? Red Rose tensed. This was the moment where violence could erupt or be delayed. Reed read her concern. He won't try anything yet. Too many witnesses in town. I'll meet you halfway, Judge, Reed called out. For safety's sake. Jackson moved to the window beside Red Rose. Emily and Martinez clear yet. Need another minute or two, she whispered. Reed strapped on his gun belt and badge. Keep out of sight. I'll engage him as long as possible. He stepped onto the porch, hands conspicuously empty. Through the window, Red Rose watched as Crawford dismounted and walked into the pool of light, cast by the mining office's lamp. Judge Emmett Crawford cut an imposing figure despite his 60-plus years. Tall, white-haired, with the bearing of a man accustomed to deference. His black coat and string tie gave him the appearance of respectability that had fooled so many for so long. Behind him waited at least 8 riders. Among them, Red Rose recognized Lucas Reeves, his expression murderous even at a distance. Marshal Reed, Crawford greeted, his voice carrying clearly in the night air. I have here warrants for the arrest of Sarah Blackwood, Thomas Jackson, Gabriel Martinez, and Alistair Miller. Reed took the proffered papers, making a show of examining them. These charges are quite serious, Judge. Might I ask what evidence supports them? The sworn testimony of Lucas Reeves, among others. These fugitives attacked his property in Ash Hollow, assaulted his men, and kidnapped a woman under his protection. Reed's laugh was cold. Interesting version of events. I have information suggesting that Mr. Reeves and his brothers kidnapped Sarah Blackwood's daughter to draw her out of hiding. A daughter, I might add, who is legally orphaned. If you're claiming Sarah Blackwood is the notorious Red Rose thought dead these 20 years. Crawford's congenial mask slipped momentarily. You seem remarkably well informed for a man who only just arrived in the territory, Marshal. I go where corruption leads me, Judge. It's brought me back to Wyoming after a long absence. The tension between the two men was palpable even from a distance. Red Rose checked the rear of the building. Through the open hidden door, she saw empty space. Emily and Martinez had made it to the tunnel. Now, she whispered to Jackson. He nodded, understanding her intent. If Emily was clear, it was time to shift from defense to offense. Red Rose stepped onto the porch beside Reed. Evening, Judge Crawford. Been a long time. Crawford's composure cracked at the sight of her. His hand moved instinctively toward his coat, then stopped. Sarah Blackwood. He managed, recovering quickly. Or should I say Red Rose? You're under arrest for... Save it. She cut him off. We both know why you're really here. Why you took my daughter. Why you've spent 20 years covering up what happened at Eagles Canyon. Crawford's eyes narrowed. I don't know what lies you've been spreading, but... No lies, Judge. Just Matthew's evidence. Red Rose savored the momentary flash of panic in his eyes. The evidence he gathered about your land deals with the railroad, about how you fabricated charges against Rattlesnake Foster, about how you deliberately positioned my posse and those innocent people for a bloodbath that would clear the way for your associates to claim valuable coal deposits. Crawford's face reddened. Preposterous Marshal Reed, I insist you arrest this woman immediately. Reed remained impassive. The evidence is quite compelling, Judge, enough to warrant a federal investigation. Based on what? The desperate fabrications of a notorious criminal? Crawford's voice rose. I'll have your badge for this, Reed. You can try, Reed replied calmly. But I answer to Washington, not to you. And Washington has been very interested in certain irregularities in the territorial courts. Crawford's mask of civility shattered completely. Reeves, he barked. Take them. Lucas Reeves and his men reached for their weapons. Red Rose drew faster, her revolver leveled at Crawford's chest before Reeves could clear leather. Tell your dogs to heel, Judge, she said coldly, or I'll finish what should have ended 20 years ago. Crawford froze, eyes fixed on her gun. You shoot me and my men will cut you down. Probably, she agreed, but you'll still be dead. For a long moment, the tableau held Red Rose with her gun on Crawford Reed, covering Reeves Jackson with his weapon, trained on Crawford's other men. Behind them, townsfolk had begun to gather, drawn by the confrontation. Then a new voice cut through the tension. Everyone lower your weapons. Federal marshals. From the shadows emerged 4 armed men, badges glinting in the lamplight. They moved with military precision, taking positions that covered Crawford's group from multiple angles. Reed smiled thinly. My colleagues, Judge, as I mentioned, Washington is quite interested in your activities. Crawford's face went from red to ashen. This is a mistake, a terrible mistake. The only mistake, Red Rose said quietly, was believing you could bury the truth forever. A commotion from behind drew her attention. Thunder appeared at the edge of the crowd, Emily beside him. The girl clutched the oilskin packet of evidence, head held high despite the danger. Her eyes met her mother's across the distance, a silent communication passing between them. In that moment, Red Rose saw not just her daughter, but her legacy. Not the violence or the vengeance, but the courage and the justice that had been her true purpose all along. Judge Emmett Crawford, Reed announced formally, you are under arrest for conspiracy, land fraud, obstruction of justice, and the wrongful deaths of 12 members of the Eagle Canyon Shoshone Band. As Reed recited the charges, Red Rose lowered her weapon. The time for guns had passed. Now came the reckoning that could only be delivered by law, true law, not Crawford's corrupted version. Crawford's shoulders slumped in defeat. You can't prove any of this. It's been too long. Witnesses are dead or scattered. Not all of them. Thunder stepped forward, his presence commanding attention. I bear witness for my people. For 20 years I have carried their story, waiting for this day. One by one, others joined him. Doc emerging from the shadows. Martinez reappearing from wherever he had escorted Emily. And finally Mary, supported by a townswoman, her eyes clear for the first time in days. Mary, Jackson whispered, disbelieving. She smiled weakly. The fog is lifting, Thomas. I remember now. Crawford kept me drugged. Used me to control you when he learned you were working with Reed. Lucas Reeves made a desperate move for his gun. One of Reed's deputies fired the shot, echoing through the night. Reeves collapsed, clutching his shoulder. His opportunity for violence ended before it began. "Take the judge into custody," Reed ordered his men. "And Reeves, the others too." He turned to Red Rose. "It's over. After 20 years, it's finally over." But Red Rose knew better. Some things were never truly over. The ghosts of Eagles Canyon would always haunt her. The blood would never completely wash from her hands. Yet as Emily crossed to stand beside her, head held high and eyes clear, Red Rose felt something she had not experienced in 20 years. Hope. The trial of Judge Emmett Crawford became the most sensational legal proceeding in Wyoming territorial history. For 3 weeks, witnesses testified to his corruption, his land schemes, and his orchestration of the Eagles Canyon massacre. Red Rose, once again, Sarah Blackwood, in the eyes of the law, gave her testimony with unflinching honesty. She claimed no innocence, no absolution for her role in the deaths, but she laid bare the manipulation that had led her posse into becoming unwitting executioners. Thunder spoke for his people, his dignified presence, and measured words carrying weight that no white man's testimony could match. Doc Martinez and Jackson added their accounts to the full story, emerging like a tapestry woven from individual threads of truth. Mary, gradually recovering from years of drug captivity, revealed how Crawford had used her as leverage against Jackson after discovering his cooperation with Reed. And finally, Matthew's evidence, the documents, the maps, the official correspondence provided the irrefutable proof that sealed Crawford's fate. The verdict, when it came, surprised no one. Guilty on all counts. The sentence, death by hanging. On the day of Crawford's execution, Sarah stood with Emily on a hill overlooking the territorial capital. They did not attend the hanging. They had seen enough death. "What happens now?" Emily asked as the distant church bell tolled, signaling that justice had been done. Sarah removed the red bandana from her pocket, the symbol of a past she would never again need to wear. "We go home," she said simply, "or somewhere new. Your choice." Emily considered this. "Pine Ridge knows the truth now, about you, about Red Rose." "Yes." The story had spread as stories do, embellished and romanticized, but containing the essential truth. "We can start fresh somewhere else. Denver, maybe, or San Francisco." Emily shook her head. "No, Pine Ridge is home, and they need a new sheriff." Sarah looked at her daughter in surprise. "Sheriff? You can't be serious. Why not you train me well, even when you didn't mean to?" Emily smiled, Matthew's gentle wisdom shining through her eyes. "Besides, who better to keep the peace than someone who knows the cost of violence?" Pride swelled in Sarah's chest, not the fierce pride of Red Rose, but the quiet joy of a mother seeing her child grow into someone extraordinary. "You'd make a fine sheriff someday," she conceded, "though you might be a bit young yet." "Not me," Emily said, taking her mother's hand. "You." Before Sarah could respond, riders approached along the dusty road below. Thunder, Doc Martinez, and Jackson with Reed at their head. They had attended the execution as witnesses to the final act of a 20-year tragedy. "It's done," Reed announced as they reached the hillside. "Crawford met his end with less dignity than I expected. Confessed to everything at the end, hoping for mercy he didn't deserve." Sarah nodded, something like closure settling over her. "And the immunity agreements, signed and sealed," Reed confirmed. "Your past as Red Rose is officially forgotten by the law, if not by history." He handed her a folded document. "There's something else. The territorial governor was impressed by your testimony, by all of your testimonies. He's offered a proposal." Sarah unfolded the paper, reading quickly. Her expression shifted from confusion to disbelief. "Deputy U.S. Marshal," she questioned. Reed nodded. "All of you. Special appointments. The territory needs law officers with your unique experiences." Jackson laughed. "The Rose Gang writing for the law. Who would have thought?" "Not a gang," Thunder corrected solemnly. "A posse. There is a difference." Sarah looked at each of them, these broken, haunted individuals who had been her family in blood and violence, and who now stood at the threshold of redemption. "We'd be under your command," she asked Reed. "Nominally. In practice, you'd operate with considerable autonomy." His weathered face creased in a rare smile. "I'm getting too old for the trail. Need good people I can trust to deliver justice where it's needed." Sarah glanced at Emily, seeing the pride and encouragement in her daughter's eyes. Then she looked back at the document in her hands, an opportunity not just for a new beginning, but for atonement. "I can't speak for the others," she said finally, "but I accept." One by one, her former companions nodded their agreement. Even Doc, his hands steadier now that the ghosts of the past had been confronted, gave his assent. "What about Mary?" Sarah asked Jackson. His expression softened. "She's recovering, remembering more each day. She wants to build a life together, a real one this time, based on truth. And you, Thunder, your people may not approve of you wearing a white man's badge." The Shoshone warrior's face remained impassive. "My people understand balance, justice. The role of the peacemaker is to stand between worlds." He touched the badge now pinned to his buckskin shirt. "This is just another form of that ancient duty." As the sun began its descent toward the western mountains, Sarah felt the past 20 years collapse into this single pivotal moment. Red Rose was truly gone, now laid to rest with Crawford's execution. In her place stood Sarah Blackwood, no longer a fugitive from her past, but a woman facing her future with clear eyes. "There's one more thing," Reed said, interrupting her thoughts. "Ash Hollow." Sarah tensed. "What about it?" "The government's seized it as part of Crawford's illegal holdings. It needs to be restored, rebuilt, made into something that honors what happened there, not erases it." Reed fixed his gaze on Jackson. "I thought maybe you might be interested in overseeing that project. You always did have a talent for building things." Jackson's eyes widened in surprise, then understanding. "A chance to heal what was broken." "Yes, Mary and I could do that." And Thunder, Reed continued, "The governor has proposed establishing a formal peace council. Representatives from all tribes in the territory meeting regularly with officials to resolve conflicts before they escalate. He's asked if you would consider serving as chief negotiator." Thunder's normally stoic expression softened. "This is unexpected wisdom from the white government. I would be honored." "But poor Martinez." Reed turned to the quiet tracker. "I go where I'm needed," Martinez said simply. "South, perhaps. The borderlands have many children who have lost families to violence. Someone should teach them there are paths beyond revenge." Doc chuckled. "And I suppose I'll keep patching up whatever you all break. These old hands aren't as steady as they once were, but they still remember how to stitch and set bones." Emily, who had been listening silently, stepped forward. "And my mother, where will she serve?" Reed smiled. "I thought perhaps Pine Ridge might need a new deputy sheriff, someone who knows the area, someone the townsfolk already respect." Sarah's breath caught. A chance to return home, to serve openly, honestly, to build rather than destroy. "What do you think?" she asked Emily. Her daughter's smile was answer enough. "I think Red Rose can finally rest in peace, and Sarah Blackwood can come home." As they mounted their horses to begin the journey back to Pine Ridge, Sarah felt the weight of the 12 names carved over her heart. They would always be there, a reminder of the cost of violence. But now they drove her toward a different purpose: protection, rather than vengeance, building, rather than destroying. The red bandana she left on the hillside, a splash of color against the brown earth, a fitting grave marker for a ghost that would no longer haunt her. Red Rose was dead. Sarah Blackwood rode on. Pine Ridge welcomed them home with a mixture of caution and curiosity. The story of Red Rose had spread faster than a prairie fire, transforming with each telling. Some versions painted her as a cold-blooded killer, others as a folk hero led astray. The truth, as always, lay somewhere in between. Sheriff Daniels met them at the edge of town, his weathered face unreadable. "Marshal Reed sent a telegram," he said by way of greeting. "Said you'd be coming back. Said a lot of other things too." Sarah met his gaze steadily. "All of it true, I expect." Daniels nodded slowly. "Town council met yesterday. Lot of debate about whether you'd be welcome here, considering—" He gestured vaguely, encompassing her past. Emily stiffened beside her mother, ready to defend her. "And," Sarah asked quietly, "and they decided Pine Ridge could use a deputy with experience." Daniels extended his hand, a deputy's badge resting on his palm. "If you want it." Sarah stared at the badge, remembering another one buried in her trunk for 20 years. That one had represented authority taken. This one was being offered freely, with knowledge of who she had been and who she had become. "I want it," she said, accepting the badge. "Thank you." Daniels nodded, then surprised her by offering a rough embrace. Good to have you back, Sarah. The real you. Sure you? As they rode down Pine Ridge's main street, Sarah saw familiar faces watching from doorways and windows. Mrs. Abernathy from the church, Thomas from the general store, Mrs. Peterson from the bakery where Emily had worked. Some nodded in cautious greeting. Others simply watched, reserving judgment. Sarah had expected no less. Trust once broken could not be rebuilt in a day, but it could be rebuilt one honest action at a time. They reached the small house that had been their home. It stood untouched, waiting for their return. Inside, dust had settled on the furniture, but otherwise it remained exactly as they had left it, a testament to the respect the townsfolk still held for the Blackwood women despite the revelations. Home, Emily said softly, running her fingers along the kitchen table where they had shared so many meals. For as long as you want it to be, Sarah agreed. Though I understand Reed offered you a position as well. Junior deputy once you're of age. Emily smiled. I haven't decided yet. Thought I might try running the general store for a while. Learn the business side of things before I commit to chasing outlaws. Wise decision. Your father would approve. The mention of Matthew no longer brought the sharp pain it once had. His memory had been restored, his final actions revealed as heroic rather than foolhardy. The letter he had left, now part of official court records, had helped bring Crawford to justice and clear Sarah's name. In the days that followed, Pine Ridge adjusted to the truth about Sarah Blackwood. Some townsfolk kept their distance. Others, driven by curiosity or compassion, made efforts to let her know she was still welcome among them. Sheriff Daniels proved a fair-minded supervisor, neither dwelling on her past nor ignoring her expertise. Together they established a new era of law enforcement in Pine Ridge, one based on prevention rather than punishment, understanding rather than fear. 1 month after their return, a letter arrived from Jackson. He and Mary had begun the restoration of Ash Hollow, converting the ghost town into a community for families displaced by railroad expansion. The old church where Sarah had performed Thunder's ritual of naming was being rebuilt as a meeting hall for peace councils. Thunder had taken his position as chief negotiator, seriously traveling between tribal lands and territorial offices, building bridges of understanding where once there had been only suspicion and hatred. His status as both a respected warrior and a federal marshal gave him unique authority in both worlds. Martinez had indeed gone south, establishing a school for orphan children along the border. His quiet strength and patience made him an ideal teacher for young souls who had known too much violence too soon. Doc had surprised them all by accepting a position at the territorial hospital. His hands steadier now that he had found purpose again, performed surgeries that saved lives instead of just patching up wounds. He still drank, but with moderation rather than desperation. As for Calvin Reed, he had been promoted to chief marshal for the Wyoming Territory, his 20-year pursuit of Crawford recognized as exemplary service. Under his leadership, corruption within the territorial justice system was being systematically rooted out and destroyed. 6 months after Crawford's execution, Sarah sat on the porch of their home, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains in shades of gold and crimson. Emily joined her, carrying 2 cups of coffee. Letter came from Thunder today, Emily said, handing her mother one of the cups. The Peace Council is working. 3 disputes resolved without a shot fired. Sarah smiled. Good, that's how it should be. He also sent this. Emily produced a small package wrapped in deerskin. Inside, Sarah found a carved wooden rose stained red with natural pigments. A note accompanied it. The red rose now blooms without thorns. May it remind us that even instruments of death can be transformed into symbols of beauty. Sarah turned the carving in her hands, feeling the smooth contours, the delicate petals. 20 years ago, a red rose had meant vengeance, had signaled death. Now it represented something else entirely: rebirth, transformation, hope. Do you miss it? Emily asked quietly. The excitement, the purpose. Being Red Rose. Sarah considered the question carefully. I miss the clarity sometimes, knowing exactly who the enemy was, knowing my role. She placed the wooden rose on the porch railing. But no, I don't miss Red Rose. She served her purpose, but she was born from rage and pain. What I do now comes from something better. Justice instead of vengeance. Exactly. They sat in companionable silence as the last light faded from the sky stars emerging one by one. In the distance, a coyote called a lonely sound that nevertheless spoke of wildness and freedom. "I've been thinking," Emily said after a while, "about what Thunder said, about how I'm both Sarah Blackwood's daughter and Red Rose's daughter, about how we carry both sides of our heritage." Sarah turned to her, curious. And I think that's true for everyone. We all have the capacity for violence and for compassion, for vengeance and for forgiveness. Emily's young face was solemn in the gathering darkness. The difference is in which side we choose to nurture. Sarah felt a swell of pride so intense it brought tears to her eyes. This wise young woman was her legacy, not the notoriety of Red Rose, not the trail of bodies left in her wake, but this clear-eyed, compassionate soul who understood what had taken Sarah herself decades to learn. "Your father would be so proud of you," she said softly. "I know I am." Emily smiled, Matthew's gentle wisdom shining in her eyes. "He'd be proud of you too, Mama, of who you've become, of who you chose to be when the time came." As night settled fully over Pine Ridge, Sarah Blackwood, once the notorious Red Rose, now deputy sheriff and respected townswoman, sat with her daughter and contemplated the future. A future built not on bearing the past, but on acknowledging it, on carrying its lessons forward rather than its burdens. The wooden rose caught the last light of day, glowing briefly before darkness claimed it. Tomorrow, Sarah would place it on her desk at the sheriff's office, a reminder not of who she had been, but of who she had chosen to become. Red Rose was dead, but the rose still bloomed, and in that blooming there was peace at last. The end.